So I heard that you did not want Incredibles 2 to be made at all. So why?
It's so true. I was like, we made it. Why are we going to do it? Why make another one? Let's make something new, And there was a screaming match actually between Brad and I and his producer John Walker. This was a few years ago. I say screaming match. You have to realize that the three of us are the best of friends, so screaming like brothers at each other and arguing as to should we or should we not do this, And my whole thing was like, look, that one worked. I don't know how it worked, but it worked. Why do we want to risk this? What if this one we do sucks? Like, what if it's not a worthy follow-up to that? And that was my big point. And I said, and if you think about it, we're not real young. It's like, how many movies do we have in us? And let's take that chance to do something new. And Brad was really adamant. He felt like, no, we can do something new with this, man. We can do something new. And if we don't do it, someone else is going to do it for us. And we can't let that happen. And that was like our whole conversation. It was really amusing. You should have been there.
So that's how he twisted your arm and got you on board?
Look, there was no way I wasn't going to do that movie, obviously. But, as friends and as artists, we are always constantly pushing each other into areas of discomfort. And it's all in a loving way. I want him to stretch and do as many things as he can because I love working with him. And he does that to me, too. And he's like, no, I'm going to push you in a whole different thing here. It's going to be the same vibe, but we're going to need a lot of new stuff for this movie. And he goes, you're not going to be bored. I said, I'm not worried about being bored. I don't think. So these are these just stupid conversations you have, 2 years before you start working on something.
Well, the first Incredibles was your first movie.
It was my first movie, yes.
So what do you remember from that whole experience?
Not much. It was all a blur. I remember being worried about being fired. I remembered thinking, like, why on earth would they hire me for this when all I've really done is a handful of video games, and I was working on Alias, a show called Alias at the time. But Brad really liked that music, and I think the real reason was because John Barry had left the project at the time, and they ran out of money, so I was cheap. And they were like, okay, well, we like his music. He's cheap. Let's grab him and give him a shot. And but I fully expected every step along the way to be fired. I woke up every morning during that period thinking, well, today's the day you lose the film that you really, really, really want to work on.
14 years later, they have to convince you to come back. So.
Yes.
Well, I mean, you've worked on a lot of sequels, so how do you build on something you've already created? And, a lot of these scores, a lot of fans are already familiar with.
Yeah.
So how do you
well,
build on
it's
that?
interesting. For The Incredibles, and most of the movies I work on, I don't really watch them again. Once they're out, I don't go back and watch them. I don't listen to them unless I'm forced to. And recently it's been, doing live-to-picture concerts, things like that. Or if my kids want to watch it, they're like, can we, okay. And I may or may not hang around for it. But there's a lot of trauma involved when you're creating something. And what the movie does is just bring all that back to you. So I tend to want to, just avoid that. So I hadn't seen The Incredibles in years when we started working on this. And I didn't go back to even listen to it or figure out what I should do. Because I remember on that first one, I grew up, I had such a love and of John Barry and of Hoyt Curtin and of Henry Mancini and all of these greats who were writing some of the most incredible sort of jazz orchestral music of the day. And I remember on the first one, I felt like I really leaned into that in a big way. But on this one, I felt I didn't go back and listen to any of those scores that I referenced for the first one. I didn't go back and listen to what I wrote. I just sort of wrote what I wanted to write on this one. I just felt like, okay, now it's my turn to just sort of write what I want to write. And the process was a much faster process than the original film. The original film I had months to work on. This one was down to weeks, and in a matter of, I would say maybe it was 5 weeks. I had to write this from start to finish. So it was a little nuts because their schedule, they had a year chopped off of their schedule because when they started changing around how Toy Story was going to be, they asked, hey, Brad, can we pull your film up? You'll lose a year, but it'll give Toy Story another year to figure out what's going on. And he was like, sure, let's do it. So he works great when he's backed up against a corner. But that meant the entire crew was also backed up against the corner as well. But
And you got 5 weeks.
I kind of liked that. I'm not one to want to come in too early on a project. I find if you come in too early, no one really knows what they want yet, and you end up writing, rewriting, trying this, trying that. And I'm like, well, why don't you all just wait till you figure out what you want, and then I can come in and kind of work with that. And so I actually prefer to have less time than more time, and I write really fast. I'm very focused. I love what I do, so I have no problem getting up in the morning and doing it. And I feel like that sort of cliff that is slowly approaching you actually puts the fear of God in you to actually get the work done. And it's like, otherwise, if you have tons, I find I end up just, wandering around doing other things other than working if I have too much time.
So besides like doing whatever you wanted, did you have like a goal in mind for Incredibles 2? Because there is still like a spy jazz.
Yes, that's that we knew we wanted that. I think the goal for myself was just to experiment and have fun and just throw ideas out there. I knew I wanted to give Elastigirl her own big theme. She had a small theme in the last film, but it was more of a, I would say, a romantic type of theme. And it was never really played out as much, but she became a huge character in this. I mean, this was really all about her, and that made me very excited because she was always my favorite character from the first film. So I wrote a whole new theme for her, which we used throughout the film. Then, of course, you have all of the other guys. You have the screenslaver. You have the kids at Frozone got something. I mean, it's just all of these things that you get to sort of. It was less about developing and more about just adding to what we had. So I think that was fun to try and figure out, okay, what can we add as opposed to what can we steal from what we did, And it actually became sort of difficult at times to go, well, we know we want that old Incredibles theme in there every once in a while, but where are we going to do it? And it was kind of hard to find those places to do it because there was so much new stuff being created that it's kind of stood on its own 2 feet in different ways. But we found them because, again, you also want the people in the audience to know they're sitting in an Incredibles movie, so that's part of it too.
That's always like whenever I watch like sequels in theaters, like people always clap when like the original, the old theme comes on.
Yes.
Like, yeah.
So. I know. And well, it's a very emotional. Music is a very emotional thing, and it's sort of like, I don't know about you, but whenever I smell mousse, I think of my prom. Hair mousse. I'm like, prom, 1986. And music is a very similar thing. It can bring you back to
like
a moment in
Pavlovian,
time.
yeah.
Absolutely. It brings you back to a moment in time. And it's not just film scores. It could be songs. It could be anything. But it has that power to just suck you back in time and put you right back where you were. And it's a really odd little piece of magic that happens. And I'm not quite sure how it works.
Mm-hmm. Well, in this one, you also wrote jingles for Mr.
Yes,
Incredible.
that was actually a really fun thing to do on this. Yes.
I love them.
Yeah, because we were talking about this early on about, these guys probably would have had TV shows based on their characters. If they're famous superheroes, it stands to reason that there would have been some sort of entertainment based around them. And if Mr. Incredible had a show, what would that be? And what would that theme be for that show? And so I wrote one for Mr. Incredible. I wrote one for actually, it's kind of a funny story. Brad kept bugging me. Okay, when are we going to get those jingles? Because we have to animate them, and we have schedules with the voice actors to come in and sing them and do all that. I'm like, oh, no worry, don't worry. I got it covered. And I was working on, I think, Jurassic World at the time, and I totally forgot that I had to do these things. And then Brad calls me. This happens twice. Brad calls. He goes, remember Friday? This is like on a Tuesday. He goes, Friday we're recording all of the thing. I'm like, no worries, I got it. And I kind of forgot, but I was like, okay, I'll do that. I'll do that. And then the night before the recording session, I totally forgot to do them. And so I literally woke up at 5 a.m. I freaked out. I was like, oh my God, because they were recording at like 10 o'clock.
Did you wake up remembering? Did you
I woke up remembering. It was just like one of those nightmares you just wake up from screaming. And I was just like, I got to go. I got to leave. So I ran out to my office to the piano, and I wrote them all that morning within an hour. I wrote all 3 of them. And again, fear makes you do things, and I would start sending. As soon as I finish one, I'd email it to him. He goes, "Oh, okay, I like this. Where are the rest? I'm email. Give me a minute, and I'd go and write another one. I write another one. Get them. Anyway, they got them all in time, and the guys sang everything to those piano tracks. but it was it was a nightmare for me. They didn't realize all of this until I told them later. And I'm usually really not that irresponsible. I'm way more organized
It was those
than
dinosaurs,
that.
man.
Yeah, the damn dinosaurs. And that was but they got done.
Yeah, and they're great.
They're so much fun, and I got to work with my friend Alex Lackamore, who did the arrangements on them. After we recorded them, we did the arrangements, and Alex is, he did all the arrangements for Hamilton and many other things. He's just an incredible musician. Love that guy. So it's fun to get to work with you sometimes are lucky to get to work with your friends on these things, and normally Alex and I wouldn't have a chance to work together, but this actually was a perfect sort of opportunity.
Well, I love puns, and so many of your track titles are puns, and some on this one.
You know, it's so funny. There's a lot of people that hate those.
Why? I love them. Well, okay, so some on Incredibles 2. Train of Thought, Helen of Ploy, Together, Forever, and Dever, A Dash of Reality, and dash is a recurring word in a lot of your titles. And my favorite one is A Bridge to Par. So when did this all start?
This started years and years ago on Alias, actually, with my music editor, Steve Davis. And, on a television show, you're working a lot. You're doing 24, 26 episodes of these things. And Steve would get bored, and after spotting, well, we never even really had spotting sessions, but when he would have to make up the cue sheets, he'd be like bored, so he would just start making up these ridiculous titles. And I would be like, well, come on, there's got to be a better one than that. We would start having these contests back and forth about who could make up the better title. And it was just a way for us to have fun and pass some time while we were working. And that then migrated into the films we started working on, and now we have this massive library of ridiculous titles. And people actually, there's a huge group of people that do not like that I do that. There are message boards filled with complaints about this, and because they're like, does he not take this seriously? Did you see what he named that Star Trek cue? Does he not take this seriously? He must hate Star Trek. I'm like, what? I love Star Trek. What are you talking about?
A lot of thought goes into these puns.
Yeah, that's not easy. But they would rather have just like, to warp or the rock falls or whatever it is that all of these things. I remember, like in Raiders, one of the tracks is, the desert chase. And you're like, that's fine, but ours,
they want to know exactly what it is.
Yeah, they just want that. Don't make fun of this. And we're not making fun of it. We're having fun with it. I mean, and come on, it's a movie. Yeah. It's not real. It's not.
Do you ever come up with the punny title first and then write the music?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. And there are times like when and it's like I said, it's always a contest between us. I think one of the best. I have a couple of music editors that I work with, and Paul Appelgren. Read the ones on the Planet of the Apes films. I mean, he pretty much kicked my ass on all of those. He won almost every single one of those because he's really good at it. I don't know where it comes from, but he's really good.
It's like guerrilla warfare.
But it's fun. But now, Jeff Cricken, my orchestrator, gets into the act, and everyone is sort of like, well, I got one. I think this one's better. Even on the stage, we'll be recording on stage, and I'll be like, this cue, we got to change this, Steve. We got to change the title. I'm not even paying attention to what the orchestra's doing. We're more concerned about, like, this title sucks. I think this could be a better title.
What's your favorite pun title?
I don't know. You mentioned A Bridge to Par, and I think that's a really, really, really good one. But the Apes of Wrath was also one of my favorite ones from Planet of the Apes.
Apes are so easy to do, like gorillas and
I know. Well, and we also have this other thing, World's Worst X.
Yes.
So there's been a lot of those, and that started on Alias. World's Worst Beach Party was that opening cue in Lost when the plane crashes on the beach. So there's a lot of those that pop up as well.
You also have a track on this called "Looks Like I Picked the Wrong Week to Quit Oxygen," which is just a great Airplane shout out.
We all love Airplane. Yes. Yeah. See, I guess that's where it comes from. I grew up with those. I love those kinds of movies. I'm a huge Naked Gun fan as well. I love Leslie Nielsen. I just I find that sort of humor. I like it. Sorry.
So what are you working on now?
Nothing. I cleaned my garage. What am I doing? I don't know. I started work on a musical that I've been wanting to do for years. I'm not really working till March, I think, and that'll be for Spider-Man: Far From Home. And I haven't had a break in years, and I just wanted to take some time to just do things like the garage and buy some new furniture that has been falling apart. I don't know. Just clean the rabbit cage, all the things you got to do in normal life.
Would you do Incredibles 3 in 14 years?
It's so funny. After we finished this one, I had such fun doing it. I remember at one of the Q&As we did afterwards, I was like, "Hey, Brad, so what do you think? We going to do Incredibles 3?" And the whole audience erupted. And he was like, "What? Shut up!" What? He sort of like reversed roles by the end of it because he was exhausted and it took a huge toll on him. But I don't know. Who knows?
So now you have to convince him. So
who knows? My philosophy is just wait and see what happens, and no reason to worry about anything until there's something to worry about.